and welcome to Flickering Myth. We're joined by Will Collins, the screenwriter of the brand new animated film Wolfwalkers. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, EJ, and thanks for chatting to me.
I'm so excited about this. This is, I think, one of my favorite animated movies, if not my favorite animated film of the year. It's due to the impressive art style, but also your writing. What made you want to pen this script? What brought you to Wolfwalkers?
It was a pretty easy decision for me because I'd previously collaborated with Tom Moore on Song of the Sea, and
Mhm.
I started work on that in 2008, and that was released in 2014. So it was quite a long, protracted, development and production lifespan. And Tom had started had Tom and Ross Stewart had the germ of the idea for Wolfwalkers in 2013, or maybe even late 2012. I'm not really sure. But he reached out to me. We were still, collaborating together, and he said, "Look, do you want to take a look at this Wolfwalkers project?" And as soon as they had kind of like a one-page idea down on paper, and it was like, of course, it was a no-brainer. I had to kind of continue the collaboration, and but more than that, it was kind of like the perfect story for me at the time as well, because I was, looking to scratch the itch of doing an action adventure movie as well.
Mhm.
I wanted to write something with packed a punch, and that had a pretty fast pace because Song of the Sea is lovely, but it's quite gentle, and it's has a nice little gentle rhythm to it. And I want to do something that was kind of more kinetic and full on. And Wolfwalkers provide kind of like was the perfect opportunity for me anyway.
It's a very lively film, and that's something I actually very much enjoy. Now, when you're writing this script, did you have any idea of what the animation would look like, by the end product? Or, does that affect your writing when doing an animated film? Like, I know what this will look like, so I'm gonna add that to my script.
Yes, I always knew kind of like what the world would look like because Tom and Ross had they shared an office down in Cartoon Saloon in their offices, sorry, in their building in the studio, and every time I would go down there, they literally had the walls wallpapered with concept art from the get go. So like the very first thing I think they actually created was the wolf hunting posters. Like in the movie, you see the like wolf hunting posters, and that was I think one of the first things that Ross designed. So they were like on the walls. First of all, I was like, oh wow, okay, that's it. But then they started playing around with the character designs, and then they started very early on kind of creating the wood block print concepts for the internals of the city and stuff like that. So I was always aware of how the potential of how it was going to look, and from my experience of Song of the Sea, I was kind of aware of the potential, with regard of like how dialogue and how action could possibly look on a 2D animated film. But I think the only time where I was unsure was because I was just thinking about it today for the first time in a long, long time was the wolf vision sequence,
Mm.
or segments where the characters kind of slip into the wolf vision mode, and that was in from the very first draft, and I honestly I don't know who to credit for that because I honestly don't know because we such a collaborative process that you can kind of give us all credit for all ideas. Um, but I remember coming to that point, writing the script where I just realized I came to a stop where I was a point where Robin becomes a wolf, and I went, how does this look? How is this going to be different? What's I know kind of like um, I know precedent to actually reference to in any of the other films, and I went, oh God, they're really going to have to do something different with this. So I think I remember kind of like writing an email like to Tom and Ross. I know this is what I think. No, my memory completely. I've had two kids. My wife's had two kids, so my memory is a sponge. Like a sponge, it's a holy
I
sponge, and
understand.
everything.
Two
And
kids in 2020. It's
and
acceptable.
22. Yeah, there's a lot happened. Um, but I remember just kind of like pitching. I think I remember pitching the idea of, we just see the smells and we see the kind of the way dogs see back in time through smell, and through sensation through their feet and stuff like that. And I remember kind of emailing them this idea and kind of expecting them to kind of maybe knock it on the head. But like with usual with the lads, they always just went, "Oh no, that's okay. We like they were already on it. You know, they already no, we know exactly how that's going to work." And and it's a real credit to the artists there, like how they pull that off, like and I can't remember the name of the specific artist who actually executed that, but it was amazing, amazing accomplishment, and really, I remember it outdid how I imagined it when I was initially writing it, if you know what I mean. And that was a kind of a constant thing that happened in the development of the script, where I might have questions about, let's say, for instance, the wolves. When I was writing the screenplay, I knew our kind of two main characters end up being wolves, but also we had a pack of wild wolves around. And I was writing and went, I was saying, lads, are we sure that people will be able to distinguish between the actual real wolves and the Wolfwalkers? And they were like going, yeah, don't worry about it. Like they already had it already. It was just in their brains. So I always was assured that no matter what challenges, whatever, however, I suppose poorly my visual brain operated, they were working on a level that's that made up for my failures really.
Well, that is always something curious for me as to see someone who writes a script for an animated film. Sometimes I don't know if if it's going to be 2D, 3D, hand drawn. So I find that answer to be very interesting. It kind of paints a lot of this. Now, shifting to your Irish background, you do very Irish films with Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers. Is it important to you to make your films very interesting to your culture and your community like that?
It's just, well, I suppose it's just the nature of being Irish. I ended up telling Irish stories.
Mhm,
You end up telling stories about yourself. You're kind of like holding a mirror up to yourself. But I do think it's very important that we all like I know it's a cliche to say it, but like we the more stories we hear from different points of view, the better,
mhm,
because to steal from Roger Ebert, isn't it? He said, film is an empathy machine where you can walk in the shoes of a girl in China,
mhm,
for 2 hours if an effective story is told from her point of view. And for me, it's what I know. I am Irish, obviously, but I want to tell, like I'm quite happy to tell stories on Mars or on the moon and all that sort of stuff. But when you were speaking from a place that kind of intrinsically in your bones, the voice that comes out is more authentic, and the I suppose is more specific. And so what you produce, or what I produce anyway, feels more alive and real, I suppose, because of it.
yes.
But I think it's important for us as well, to tell stories that I do enjoy telling stories that reignite old mythologies and old legends and stuff like that, because um, the saying goes that, isn't it, that it's not that history repeats itself, it's more that history rhymes. And I think it's really important to highlight things that have happened in the past, and as kind of just examples for how things can go terribly wrong in the present and in the future, as has become all too prescient in 2020 and the last couple of years. And so yeah, for me, it's important for me to kind of like, I'm Irish, and I've seen a lot of, like, in my lifetime, a lot of our kind of old heritage has you know and folklore has started to die off, and start to be lost in in the noise, particularly. So I kind of feel it's up to those of us who can tell stories to tell the stories that are on the edge of extinction,
Mhm.
to keep them alive. Um, I just watched Hamilton this weekend for the first time, and I was blown away by it. But it ignited in me an interest to actually go and look more into the life of, well, Alexander Hamilton, but like more about all these characters, Aaron Burr and all this sort of jazz, and it excited an interest because it was entertaining. And so by telling entertaining and visually stimulating stories and compelling narratives, we can inspire other people in different parts of the world to kind of look in on us and kind of go, oh wow, isn't that, that's the Irish experience, and that's the Irish bit of the Irish story. And I think if we all did that, we would have, I suppose, a richer and more empathetic view of the wider world, really.
I agree. I love international films for that reason. I get to see places in Korea and be like, oh, that looks exactly like my cities. Same thing with, modern Irish films. So I do very much agree with you of you can use it to explore. I mean, I spent my day Googling Wolfwalkers to see the mythology. I like werewolves and stuff like that. So, you sent me through a journey, and I appreciate that of me going, oh, this is interesting mythology. I'm from America. Our myths
Yeah.
only go so far.
I'll give you an interesting thing that you might know is that I kind of think that we kind of, one of the kind of core kind of development, I suppose, totems that we had in the story was a bit of real life propaganda that was
Mm.
made back by Cromwell and his forces back in 1640, where, and the lads had it actually. It was a pamphlet that they'd made up that they distributed to the mercenaries and wolf hunters, and in it you see a wolf but standing on its hind legs and wearing humans' clothing. And so they distributed this pamphlet as propaganda to their mercenaries and wolf hunters to say, listen, we want you to go out and, kill the wolves in the forest. But if you come across, some kind of rebellious Irish people in there or priests, we'll pay you for their hide as well, because in
Wow.
actual fact, they're shapeshifters, and
Wow.
we've got the evidence to prove it right here. We've got the evidence in this picture. Look, they're shapeshifters. So if you kill
Yeah.
one, you're killing the other. So you're doing everyone a favor, like, in a way. So they used storytelling, they used propaganda to rationalize kind of like acts of genocide, really.
Hmm.
So storytelling be used for good and bad. Um,
Yeah.
that's, I suppose, a good lesson to be learned.
Oh, yes, yes. I think we see it sometimes, again, turning on the news. But I like that you took inspiration from your heritage and things like that. But looking at one character specifically, where did you get the inspiration for the character Robyn? Was she wholly something of your imagination? I know you said you have kids. So did that inspire that? Where did you get Robyn? Because I do think she's one of our coolest female characters of the year.
Oh, great. Thanks. Well, I can give you the scoop that Robyn visually is inspired by Tom Moore's wife. He designed her to kind of mirror her. But when it comes to writing Robyn as a character, Robyn actually started off as a boy, and
Oh,
the very first couple of drafts, I think the first two drafts, Robyn was a boy, and he like went into the woods and made friends with Mebh. And we got a couple of notes. So when I initially started writing that character, I basically was, when I'm writing any character, I need to try and find a way to empathize with that character to understand where they're coming from,
okay.
and so I kind of like pulled from my own experiences of growing up in a rural Irish town, where kind of sport and farming were kind of the main and topics of conversation, and pulling from my own passion for cinema, which was something that was a very insular and very, uh, kind of a lonely kind of passion to have, because really no one shared it, and a desire to kind of like be a creative person and tell stories and whatnot like that. And so I grew up in a society kind of feeling I wanted to do something else. I had my magnetic north was pointing in a different direction to the world, kind of like my social sphere growing up. And so I pulled on that experience when writing Robyn, because in my initial ideas of Robyn was that Robyn um, was trying to be a hunter, like his dad, but in actual
Mhm.
fact he just wasn't that person. But then Robyn, once we changed Robyn to a girl, which was the kind of a perfect decision for us in our story, Robyn, it kind of amplified that idea that Robyn wants to be a hunter, wants to be out, with her father, wants to be out in the woods. That's where her north is. But she's been shoved into this box, into this cage, and into this, way of life. Um, so I kind of just pulled on my own experience for that. But then from the actual relationship, the kind of key to Robyn is her kind of like core relationships, and her relationship with her dad
Mm,
is important because it's a very warm, loving, um, caring relationship, mutually very, very caring relationship. Um, and that kind of informs who she is because she is a warm, compassionate person. But the other key relationship is her relationship that she develops with Maeve, and that's kind of core to the story. And the a kind of a template for that is not a template, but a kind of a touchstone for that for us. We had two kind of filmic touchstones when developing the story, and that was Son of Rambo. Have you ever seen that?
yes, I have.
So it's that relationship that they have in Son of Rambo. Ross was always the one who was saying, it's kind of like that relationship. It's that friendship you have as a kid with someone who is a little bit dangerous, a little bit that
Hmm.
person who's always kind of like pushing the authority figures, and maybe not from the wrong side of the tracks. That you kind of know this is a kind of a dangerous relationship, but they're essentially a really good person, and you don't see the kind of the social differences between you and them because you're both kids.
Yeah.
And so we pulled from that. And the other film that we referenced a lot when we were developing the story, and you're not going to guess it, but it was The Witch. Uh, so, so with Son of Rambo and The Witch were things we talked about an awful lot developing the story. The
I
Witch
don't
was a
know how those
yeah.
two fit together, but it
Well,
makes Wolfwalkers, so I'll take it.
the Witch from kind of like its period and its time setting and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's a puritanical family in the same period, so we kind of like looked at that a lot. Not a lot, but we just referenced it
Yeah.
a great deal when we were talking about story and stuff. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it did perfectly. I was going to say I enjoy Robyn and her father's relationship way more than the father-daughter relationship in The Witch, because I do think it's so different than our typical father trying to protect daughter Disney mentality. I think it was handled so very different in this film. So I do very much appreciate that, and I thought it was handled very well. I love their relationship. One thing before we wrap up, what is something you would want people to take away from this story? What would you like one big message or idea to take away from Wolfwalkers? There's a lot of messages in this film. It's a very
A lot of messages,
impactful
yeah,
film. So,
yeah. It's a lot of messages. I suppose we wanted to tell the kind of our agenda or mission, or my mission anyway, was to tell a very classical story.
mhm.
Tell something that people will be able to watch now. People could have watched 20 years ago. People will be able to watch 20 years from now, and be able to entertain kids, young kids, but then also still be quite rich for adults as well. There's loads of themes in there. There's themes about environmental and climate change, environmental issues, about being finding a kind of more balanced and symbiotic nature, a balance with nature. But for me, I suppose the driving dramatic arc and theme for this that kind of like really pushed the drama through for me was about, and it's a classic coming of age kind of theme, which is basically finding yourself and finding your true north, and I suppose being honest with yourself and finding the strength within yourself to know where you know where you're supposed to be going, know where your passion lies, know where who your true self is. Because if you push, I feel what happens is if we deny our true selves, if we deny ourselves and push in the direction that society thinks we should be going, what ends up is you end up creating chasm
Mhm.
inside in ourselves. And I think this chasm can be filled with bad things, and that's
Mm.
what creates the foundation of troubled people and deeply upset people, and a lot of bad things happen from that because people aren't kind of being themselves and sticking up for themselves really. And I think that's it. It's about listening to yourself and learning who your true self is, and being at peace with that, and putting at some stage putting a flag on the ground and saying, yeah, maybe you'll have to defend it at some stage, but that's an okay thing. If you fail to defend it, at least you defend it. I think that's the main thing for me.
I love that message. I think that's so powerful, and that kind of fits so many minority groups, so many individual people. So I think that works fairly well. I think that is such a great thing. All right, guys, you have to see Wolfwalkers. This is one of the best animated movies of the year. It's going to be on Apple TV Plus. Check it out as soon as you guys can. Comment down below, subscribe to Flickering Myth, and give us a thumbs up. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Will.